I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders from Mentoring Men, and with me is Dan Fritsch, another one of our mentors. And we wanted to have an unscripted conversation about something that a lot of men ask us about on a routine basis, which is, what do I do if my wife or partner says she's been feeling disconnected? And maybe she has said something like, I need space, I love you and I'm not in love with you, I need to figure myself out, I want a divorce if it's really bad. Can you think of any other terms that are...
I think one of the other ones that's a catch-all is just, I don't know what I want.
Okay, I don't know what I want.
I don't know what I want, or I don't know what my future looks like. Or the concept of the first half of my life, I want my last half or the latter
to be
part
better.
To be better.
Yeah. So this could be a really painful and difficult time for a man, and if you're like most men watching this video, you're probably very much a fixer. You probably think about, what do I got to do to make that thing change? And so it's a really common response when a woman says this, for a man to go into immediate action mode, which is, let's make her feel connected. And we find that totally backfires for men. In fact, there's a surefire way to get a woman to ask for more space is to try to connect with her when she feels disconnected. So the very first thing that I would want to say to a man whose wife has just said she feels disconnected is to actually look not at her but yourself. Oftentimes a woman is feeling disconnected from us because we're disconnected from us. And that can be really the most effective place to start thinking about how to move out of this feeling of disconnection with a partner, is to look inward. And so tell us a little bit more about your perspective of that, Dan.
Well, so my experience is, you tend to spend a lot of energy over our adult lives in pursuit of satisfaction or comfort. And, I believe we're really looking for a sense of freedom as men, and the belief that we can obtain that through other things or through our relationships with our spouse. And that leaves us very external focused. So to bring that back to ourselves, when we can center in our own value, our own worth, and it's that self-sourcing of, I'm enough even in a moment of adversity, even when a partner is being emotional and uncertain, we know that our certainty comes from within ourselves.
Right. And I'm sure you're aware of this too from the men we work with, but what we often find, I would say not just often, almost always, is that a man whose partner has told him she doesn't feel connected and wants to make space, or is not feeling connected or romantically inclined, that man generally is so disconnected with himself that his whole life has become really about other things. That man will almost always say he feels like he's in Groundhog Day, that he's living an existence that doesn't feel very purposeful and intentional. He'll feel things like he's an Uber driver and security guard, and that he just provides a paycheck. All these internal resentments, which really just kind of demonstrate what Dan's talking about, which is this man is living very externally focused, and he lost something. He lost something that he had maybe when he was a young man, and definitely a young child, which was a sense of adventure and awe and an internal awareness that he was made for something more than just punching a clock. And so, interestingly, it's often that a woman has kind of noticed this disconnection a man has in himself, and then it's like her natural response is to say, well, I feel disconnected from you. And it makes sense, really, because if I'm disconnected from me, how is my wife going to feel connected to me, right? And so that's why when a man puts his effort into rekindling this kind of internal flame, it pays big dividends. First, because he's been living a pretty dull existence, right?
Yeah, well, he's spent his life trying to obtain freedom by control.
Yeah, right.
And, and that control ends up getting the result of the people in a relationship saying, hey, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, and I feel pressure.
Yeah.
And we can't offer what we don't have in ourselves.
Right, yeah, empty tank.
Yeah, it's an empty tank, absolutely. So, that freedom it's not derived from control. over years where we kind of condition ourselves, or society or marketing leads us to believe that, hey, if I have a nice house, if I have a good paycheck, if I'm that provider for my spouse or my family, then I'm good, or I'm valued.
Right.
And that's a very external focus on obtaining freedom, and it's also it's a false narrative.
It is, and actually it's one of the gifts of this season for a man when a woman is creating this opportunity for conflict. Is in men, conflict leads to challenge, and challenge is how men grow. Adversity is actually the proving ground for maturing a man and helping him grow. And in our insecure years, we don't realize this, but what Dan's talking about, the way we're living our life, we're actually living to try to be comfortable and safe. And those things are incompatible with masculinity. And they're actually the brain trying to put us in a place where we can't be hurt, we can't feel pain, we can't feel discomfort, and we believe if I could just do all that, life is going to go okay, right? Well, if you're watching this video and your wife has recently told you she feels disconnected, and you're facing the life you've created for yourself possibly crumbling, I want to challenge you with just how effective it was to put your effort into that. And so the way men actually find freedom is not by making life comfortable. It's by learning to be resilient in discomfort, and by learning to actually go into and beyond fears. See, fear is always telling us as men where we don't have freedom, and you can't cross into that new freedom without confronting and going to war with that fear. And it's usually that we've stopped doing this as men that is why we're disconnected. We're disconnected from our very soul because we pursued a different rabbit trail of just trying to stay comfortable and in our kind of padded suburban life that's sterile and safe and predictable, certain, or at least the illusion of certainty. That's a big part of this, right? As men want to seek certainty, which is no one gets certainty, but yet the pursuit of it causes a lot of trouble.
Well, and that pursuit is exhausting.
Yeah,
it's an exhausting pursuit of the next best thing that we believe when we arrive there we're going to have comfort,
right,
freedom,
right.
And when we relax into finding that connection internally and with ourselves, I believe that's when men feel more alive and more energy,
and
sure, more robust, and that's where we offer an authentic
right,
connection.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the idea of exhausting, because one of the reasons we're so disconnected with ourselves is because we're giving all of our energy to that egoic pursuit of trying to stay pain-free and comfortable, and to try to have external things tell us that we have value and worth. And we give so much energy to that in our young years, we don't have time to have that internal connection. And this is the gift of a woman saying, I don't feel connected, or I want space, is it creates an opportunity for a man to unwind all that, because it hasn't been serving him either. And so the real journey then is to connect with yourself. And I know that feels counterintuitive to hear. You want to save your marriage, you want to save your family, you don't want divorce to happen. But there is, we talked to hundreds of men a year, and the ones who hang on to that, they hang on to what they were working for. They have a death grip on the neck of their old way of living. They almost always lose it. And it's only the guys that actually let go of trying to connect with her and let go of trying to save the marriage, and instead direct all that energy into finding their true self again, their open heart, and kind of realigning, right? That tends to work.
Yes, and the fear of the vulnerability of connecting with other men.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And if connection with yourself feels awkward or atypical, a lot of times walking with another brother can help guide you along that path.
Right. Which these men almost never are doing. Yeah. They have guys that they maybe have beers with, or watch football with, or maybe do some recreation. Yeah. But we don't usually find men in this circumstance to be deeply connected at an intimate, vulnerable, close level, right? So you just got here today, for example.
Yep.
And we met in this kind of work. And how many visits has this been for you now? Is this like
I
6?
I think we're close to 7 or 8.
Right.
Yeah.
3 hours away. And so, do you have men in your life who would drive 3 hours to hang out with you? Or do you have men in your life that you would drive 3 hours to hang out with? This is a pretty normal occurrence for us, right? We travel all over the place to see guys because they're that caliber of men. And 10 years ago, I didn't have that in my life.
Absolutely.
Right?
It was
Yeah.
a void
Pretty
of
crazy.
connection with any men. And, you know, again, you spend a lot of energy in pursuit of that freedom, believing it'll bring us peace.
Yeah. And also the opportunity, you think that life's going to happen later. Like, if I just do this all now, someday up ahead, right, that I'll actually be able to finally live. And
And you hear that at the light at the end of the tunnel, or when I retire, I will now travel and, go on all the ION, the vacations and the recreations.
Yeah.
And, and that's a very, that's an exhausting way to live your life.
It is. You basically wish your life away every day. You don't ever live in the present because you're always thinking that life is going to be tomorrow. And you get to tomorrow and then you live for tomorrow. The next thing you know, you're on your deathbed saying, what happened? Like, where did all this go? And it's because of that disconnection with self. And just to bring this full circle back, it's these moments that a female in our lives is resisting connection that are usually the canary in a coal mine that this is happening in a man's life. And I know it's hard to see that if you just heard these kind of awful words, but we promise you, from helping lots of guys through this, if you're willing to find that there's a deeper thing going on in here, and it's not about the relationship, it's about your heart, then we know that great things are in store for you. And so what we want to do is invite you to connect with us. If you scroll down below wherever you're watching this video, you'll see a link where you can request a free session. You probably talk to myself or Dan or one of the other mentors on Mentoring Men. We'll have a real deep connecting conversation with you where we'll talk about what's going on in your life, what happened, how'd you get here, what do you want to be different, and what do you think is necessary for that to happen. And then we'll share a little bit about what's possible, right? And I hope you'll take us up on that, to have conversations like this, and you'll be surprised at just how fast people are driving 3 hours to hang out with you. Any last words about this?
No, just know that if you are feeling empty and not able to connect, you're not alone. You're absolutely not alone, and reach out. There's another way.
All right. Hope to see you soon, guys.